Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
And there's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is
World.
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest. Hello, and welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the spiciest celeb news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they transpired today? I'm Sadaf Hassan.
And I'm Sarah Sahakian, and this week will be our most dramatic episode ever. If you can't tell from my extreme Bachelor voiceover voice, we are covering some of the biggest scandals to ever rock Bachelor Nation, which is the collective name by which fans refer to ABC's Bachelor and Bachelorette franchise, as well as spinoffs like Bachelor in Paradise. In March, everyone was buzzing over the disturbing domestic violence video that led to ABC canceling Taylor Frankie Paul's season of The Bachelorette, despite the fact that they already knew about the incident, which happened in 2023. And that got us thinking about the franchise as a whole, which has been mired in scandal for much of the 24 years it's been on television. The Bachelor made its debut on March 25th, 2002. Its gender flip spinoff would premiere soon thereafter. So it's been in our lives for a while, longer than we've been adults, most of our lives. So, Sadaf, what did you first think when you saw The Bachelor? How did you first come into contact with it? Were you ever an official member of Bachelor Nation?
This is such a fun question to think about because I didn't realize, it's been years, of course, but wow. I first came into contact with The Bachelorette, I suppose, because I think of Trista Wren, who is still with her firefighter man today. I think that was my first moment of touching down with the franchise at all. I was always more partial to Bachelorette versus Bachelor. I certainly watched a few seasons of it, though. I think Clayton might have been my last one. It's mired in so much scandal over time, and I think for me, it's gotten tougher and tougher as I gotten along. I used to love it so much in the start. I think over time I started to just be so stuck on the fact that this is all very old-fashioned. I think Rachel Lindsay's season really did that for me, where I started to think, you know what? Yeah, this sucks. You should get more time with the guy that you want to pick, because I still wish she chose Peter, and I still think about it to this day. So was I ever an official member of Bachelor Nation? I would say yes, on and off. But I know you have been, Sarah. I want to hear about your relationship to the franchise, because I know that's shifted too.
Yeah, so I used to be a huge fan, and I broke up with it around the time Clayton was Bachelor. It no longer feels it's entertaining, and it is so problematic. It's always been problematic, but it was no longer entertaining me enough to make up for it. But honestly, I owe a lot of my career to The Bachelor. When I was earlier in my career, did recaps of Bachelor and Bachelorette Canada as well. I literally was sent by Chorus to the Fantasy Suite, which was a suite they created at a hotel, I guess, to promote the show, which was kind of fun. And that was the only time I've ever truly felt important when I was a journalist, was when I was covering Bachelor Canada and Bachelorette Canada. So this is something that actually meant a lot to me professionally. I got professional opportunities out of my interest in it. And I was fascinated. I did think that in some ways it held a mirror up to the courtship rituals associated with compulsory heterosexuality. But do we need to do that for 24 years? At a certain point, you kind of think the point is made. I'm no longer getting anything out of this. But this show does hurt a lot of people. And we're going to discuss how the show is problematic and the various ways in which it is. And arguably becoming more problematic, right? A lot of the scandals I'm going to talk about are from the second half of the run, not even the first half of the run.
That's what gets me, because I feel like with other reality shows or television in general, right? You adapt, you evolve. This is the one that I can think of that has refused to do that. It's very odd, but take us away, Sarah.
Yeah, every time you think it's going to evolve, it doesn't really. But before we get too far into this episode, let's talk birth of a Bachelor Nation, okay? In the early 2000s, reality TV was still new. And one guy was on the cutting edge, and his name was Mike Fleiss. He executive produced one of the most talked about shows of the year 2000, Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire? Did it matter that winner Darva Conger didn't exactly find lasting love with millionaire Rick Rockwell? No, that didn't matter because the ratings were huge and the lesson was clear. Many people wanted to watch romance on their television screens, and others wanted to see Schadenfreude. So it's not surprising that Mike Fleiss went back to the dating show with The Bachelor, a show that was less overtly about gold digging, at least initially. And he really tried to center romance. In the initial seasons, there is this centering of romance in a weird way because he is simultaneously dating lots of women. But it does seem more romantic, right? If you get to stay on the show, you're given a rose, right? There's more incorporation of traditional courtship rituals. Created by reality TV's most evil of evil geniuses, The Bachelor found a group of attractive women to vie for the attentions and hopefully a proposal from one eligible bachelor. Fleiss said in the 2018 book Bachelor Nation, "If I have any skill at all, it's the ability to come up with ideas that get people talking. With so many choices out there for viewers, you've got to get people talking about your show or you have no chance at all." And as much as Mike Fleiss, and we'll talk about this later, is probably not a good human being, he is able to get you talking, right? This is a topical show, and there's a cottage industry of blogs and podcasts that just follow The Bachelor, right? So he knew what he was doing. I think he understood the zeitgeist and understood how to harness reality TV in a way that would get everyone interested. Because one fascinating thing about this show is like soccer moms watch it, university students watch it. You can get your boyfriend to watch it. If you ever want to get your boyfriend to watch reality TV and he's a straight dude, this is an easy one because a lot of it is just like hot girls in bikinis fighting for a dude. So there's a lot of wish fulfillment for straight men here.
I also feel like men are more into reality TV than they care to admit.
Yes. So I would argue that Fleiss was totally right. Over the years, the show betrayed its original premise because the leads it selected weren't even particularly eligible, but it still got you talking. And no offense to the moderately successful software salesman from Denver that it casts as The Bachelor, but I never once dreamed of marrying somebody like that as a little girl. It's no longer about the aspirational guy, right? They don't find a professional guy with a degree from an Ivy League school who's still good looking and has a great future. That's not what it's about at all, right? You want to win him just because they tell you you want to win him, which is such a sad commentary on heterosexuality in general, where it's like women are trying so hard in the dating market and a lot of men just suck, right? Like it's not even like
extremely.
Yeah.
Extremely. I'm still in it. It sucks. It sucks.
On The Bachelor, there were romantic dates for the lead and the many women competing to marry him. These dates featured private concerts with bands you'd never heard of, weird Pretty Woman-style dates where the lead bought you a whole new wardrobe, but actually the producers paid, strange group dates where half a dozen women went wine tasting with him, or volunteered at a school, or sometimes even filmed a telenovela. Leads would decide what people they wanted to keep dating at the weekly rose ceremony. And that sounds like it's ripped from the Illuminati's playbook. So that's where if he wants to keep seeing you, he gives you a rose. It's very weird if you think about it for even a split second.
Yes.
In the final episodes of each season, the lead also gets to sleep with the final few contestants in a place called the Fantasy Suite. Weirdly, no one ever referred to the show as an exercise in polyamory because the end goal was monogamy, despite the fact that plenty of non-monogamy was engaged in to get to that point.
Oh, Sarah, call it out. That's so true. I never thought about that.
Because some people will say, why don't we have more polyamorous dating shows? I'm like, this is a polyamorous dating show. That is what it is.
Well, the funny thing is, I feel like the entire concept of the Bachelor world is so steeped in tradition and purity principles until you get to the Fantasy Suite episodes. It's always been so confusing to me because then he's free or she's free to sleep with multiple people, which in reality I love. Yes, sleep with everyone you want. But it's so confusing in the world of The Bachelor, right? It's so contradictory.
It's also different from real life because if you're sleeping with 2 or 3 people in a given week, because they kind of, I think they give you a night off between encounters, to heal so you don't get a UTI. But if you're doing that in real life, unless you're a jerk, those people don't know each other, right? But here, it's really weird where you have to sleep with multiple people and they can't pretend they don't know, right? They know. And then everyone gets very confused about why the contestants start to feel jealous. I'm like, I don't know, because this is not like anything anyone does in real life.
Exactly. In my opinion, everyone should probably be raging out. I think I'd be very uncomfortable with this. Mind you, if you haven't watched any of these episodes or shows, sometimes people will sneak out and into the fantasy suite to get their moment. So it's not even as cut and dry as we're presenting it. It's messy as hell.
Yeah, it's a very messy show that puts people in these literally psychologically damaging positions because, I mean, I actually know someone who's been on The Bachelor and I talked to her about it. And the producers all day, every day just talk to you about the lead to the point where it's impossible not to fall in love with them. And then they put you in these positions where, of course, you're going to get jealous and you can't even watch the news or really read many books or talk to your friends or family. So you're just spinning. And that's why everyone has a nervous breakdown. It makes for great TV, but it's unethical as hell.
Yeah, 100% agreed.
So I think we've all agreed that, this is polyamory, even if they don't call it that. And the weird end goal is monogamy. And not everyone signs up for polyamory, but you kind of do because you sign up to be one person out of many dating the lead. It's very fraught. It's full of contradictions. Helping the audience navigate all of this complexity for a long time, especially, in the early seasons and when the show debuted, was reporter turned host Chris Harrison, who appeared on The Bachelor and Bachelorette for the first 19 years of its run. Ultimately, he left after he made racially tone-deaf comments defending a contestant who'd attended an Old South-themed party. He made these comments in an interview with former Bachelorette lead Rachel Lindsay, who was also the series' first Black Bachelorette. Some fans were so distraught when Chris Harrison stopped hosting that this literally happened. Ratings ultimately went down around 50 to 60% in the years following his departure. It's unclear if that's because of Chris, though, right? The show also really went downhill, right? And so it's unclear if it's just a bunch of racist people who are mad that Chris Harrison left because of this incident, or if it just started to be terrible. Because this is around the time I stopped watching. And I wasn't mad at all about Chris Harrison's departure, but the show really took a dip. And I don't think that has anything to do with Chris.
No, I bet it's partly. I feel like it's kind of wild. He was there for almost 2 decades. By the way, one of the funny things was always everybody saying he's also been single for 20 years. Like, why is he the face of this show? He was also not that great a host. Sorry, guys. But I do think it's so interesting that Rachel's season was really the turning point in so many ways. Like, for a lot of fans, including you and me, but then also so many other people. Like, I think it was a bizarrely watershed moment, and it was great that it actually led to his axing. Like, you should be keeping it fresh anyway. He was not a good host. Sorry.
No, but he was a company man. And one thing that I think made them really value him is that he was always on the side of ABC, right? Like, do you remember when Colton fled, right? When Colton escaped.
How could I forget?
He just jumped the fence, that famous moment. And the producers don't know what to do. They wake up Chris Harrison, who's clearly probably been, drinking. He's wearing his Tommy Bahama dad clothes. And he goes with them. And then they find Colton. And he's just so on message being like, well, you've got other attractive women left. Let's go back. Consider them as options, right? Like, he's so calm and on message. And you really think, wow, this guy will always advance the interests of the company. It doesn't matter that this young man has had a mental health crisis in front of him. He doesn't care. Zero empathy. Zero empathy.
True. That's true. He's old-fashioned himself.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just one of the many scandals that has rocked the Bachelor Nation world over the years. And we're going to talk about a few more. Sadly, we will not have time to get into all of them. There's just so much dysfunction associated with the show. And if we forget your favorite scandal or the scandal that keeps you up at night, I know it's probably not your favorite, but the one that troubles you the most, I apologize. And please get at us on social media to tell us what your Bachelor Roman Empire is. But we're going to talk about a few of them. I tried to pick events that happened on The Bachelorette or The Bachelor or other shows like Bachelor in Paradise that I feel like really illustrate the problems with the show. So I tried to do that. It was hard, honestly. I pretty much had a crisis, a nervous breakdown, wondering if I'd chosen the right ones, but just get at us.
I mean, listen, this is demanding a part 2, perhaps a part 3 down the line. So we will bring you that, guys. This is only the beginning.
Yeah. So one of the things that everyone says about the Bachelor shows is that they are both formulaic and also bizarre. So the formula never changes. You are a hot person trying to marry another hot person. That's the goal. The goal is heterosexual monogamy. Every once in a while, they flirt with queerness, but it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't signal any real changes. It's not sincere. So people fight to marry the hot person, and editing creates some weird characters. These characters are not necessarily this eccentric, but there's very liberal editing. You can read a lot about this in the book Bachelor Nation. They talk about it. The producers do kind of dastardly things to make the show bizarre. My favorite example is when they edited Bachelor in Paradise to make it look like the lovely Claire Crawley had befriended a raccoon. They made it seem like she'd gone completely nuts and was talking to a raccoon throughout the trip. Okay? She did not do that.
I forgot about that. Yeah, you know what? People say a lot about the editing over in Bravo Land, but I think it's worse. It's at its peak when it comes to ABC, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Another weird thing about the show is that the point, really, at the end of the day, even if you're deluding yourself, is not romance, as the leads very rarely marry their winner. I mean, Sean Lowe and Catherine are still married after a decade. Good for them. Trista and Ryan are still married. But those are anomalies, right? Most of these relationships do not end in marriage. And if they do, 2 of the bachelorettes who got married actually have gotten divorced. And while only 2 Bachelor leads have gotten married, one interesting fact that really shows that this is a bizarre series is that 2 leads have married their runner-up, Jason Mesnick.
Isn't that wild?
And Ari Lewandike Jr. The same number have married their runner-up as who have married their actual choice at the end of the day. Men are weird.
Men are weird, but I do think it tells us a lot in some ways. Maybe that's another story, but the fact that they ended up preferring the one who they said no to, oh my God, I can't get over that. But the numbers are not high enough, I don't even think, to really tell us all that much at the same time. Like, it's kind of wild how little that is, Sarah.
Yeah. So let's dive into the 3 scandals that I have chosen today that exemplify some, though not all, of the major issues with this franchise. And I will start with my favorite scandal, when Kaitlyn Bristowe slept with Nick Viall before Fantasy Suites. She did it before Fantasy Suites. She broke the show. Okay? I love it.
I love Kaitlyn. I love her.
She was the best Bachelorette, honestly.
She
the
was
most
the
entertaining.
best. My
Just
favorite.
iconic.
My favorite. Yeah.
Just iconic. The year was 2015. It was, in some ways, a more innocent time. We all thought Hillary Clinton would inevitably become president the next year, and skinny jeans were the peak of fashion. On a trip to Ireland, Bachelorette Kaitlyn Bristowe and second-time contestant Nick Viall were enjoying a day date that involved too much day drinking in Dublin, and the pair hooked up in week 7 of the show. That's right. Before the sanctioned fantasy suite that typically occurs when the lead has narrowed it down to her final 3 contestants. OMG, a woman and a man were dating, had consensual sex at a hotel in Dublin, and we got to see it. Wow. While we didn't see exactly what happened in Kaitlyn's boudoir, there was orgasmic audio, which makes you think that Nick Viall is very good in bed, actually.
I think he might be. And I hate to say that. I despise that man. I despise him, but probably good at bed.
I don't love him either, but I do think that he would be an attentive lover. That's how I'll put it.
Yeah, I can see it.
It sounded like he was.
Damn it. He did sound like he was.
I listened to the audio again yesterday and I'm like, oh, wow. Like this, I mean, it sounds like everyone was having a good time.
Oh my God, I haven't listened to it in a decade. Should we link it in the show notes? Should we link to the porn in the show notes?
To the porn that aired on ABC? You do feel bad because it seems like they are quite drunk and that they don't fully understand what's happening. And then the producers are recording them. It's actually, it kind of feels revenge porn adjacent. Like it's gross.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was the tricky thing. I know we're going to get into it, but like we're watching a reality show. We want to see everything. But when I listened to that bit, I agree. It made me feel very slimy. Like I did not feel comfortable. I don't know. And I'm the least prudish person you'll ever meet, but I was like, I don't feel like we should be hearing this. And I don't even know that they should be recording them. Like, I don't know. I get that they signed up for it, but
Yeah. So fan reaction to that event was intense. To paraphrase what people said online, many felt Bristowe had ruined the format of the show, and others full on slut shamed the lady for getting aroused earlier than the show sanctioned. So you're allowed to have sex, but just don't get aroused earlier. Just remember that you have genitals later when the fantasy suites happen, I guess is what everyone wanted from her. I don't know. It's very weird. However, some fans did point out the sexual double standard because other leads like Juan Pablo Galvez, who allegedly hooked up with Claire Crawley outside of fantasy suite time, did not get this type of reaction. The same is true of Bob Guinea, one of the OG Bachelors. And according to Mike Fleiss, he had sex with 5.5 women during his time on the series, which means he was having sex outside of the fantasy suite. And what's interesting here is that the producers didn't show us this at the time, right? They protected his reputation, which they did not do for Kaitlyn. And so that is a double standard, I think, on the part of the producers. So for her part, Bristowe responded to the criticism she faced for her decision, declaring, "I made a mistake, but I'm not a bad person for it." The fact that she has to say that she's not a bad person here is so sad.
this was insane. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's completely insane. And she later said of the backlash that happened online, quote, "I felt like I was being bullied by America. And since Kaitlyn is a Canadian, that must have been extra terrifying." What do you think?
I know. I'm so glad she's one of ours. Thank God. Oh, Sarah, just the rethinking about this is so brutal because I forgot. But yeah, I mean, guys, if you weren't watching and you didn't catch all of this at the time, this was quite viral. Like as viral as something gets, this was it. So a lot like we're seeing the Summer House scandal play out right now, a lot like we saw Scandal a year ago, this was kind of like that. And the beating that she got was so brutal. Like it was overwhelmingly negative, right, for her. And the fact that you're pointing out now, like how these other men did not get any of this and weren't even really exposed, really pisses me off. But this is one of the biggest things I've learned as a reality TV fan is that even when everything is different and it's not as old fashioned as The Bachelor and Bachelorette, the production team will always veer in that direction because they know that's how to engage the viewers the most. Like there will always be old fashioned rules at play, and you're always going to dunk on the woman before you dunk on the man because not only does it get you ratings, but people are going to be talking about it. I hate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really gross double standard. I mean, the show has a very well-defined and well-established gendered double standard. And here's the thing, though. What does that say about the show versus what it says about America? Because I think on some level, they're just giving Americans what they think they want, right? I think the show is a reflection of American values. Having said that, that's not a defense of what the show is doing because you don't have to feed into the worst parts of American culture. You don't have to feed into rampant misogyny, right? You don't have to do that.
No. And again, like we said earlier, I think it's so human and normal to want to hook up with the guy you're quote unquote dating. Like, why would you follow the standard procedure? To me, I remember watching it and being so thrilled because I was like, oh, that's so interesting. They're going for it. Hell yeah. I liked Nick at the time, which is so wild. I despise that beast now. I was so for it. And I think even Nick didn't get quite the amount of hate over time because that is a man we saw play again and again and again in this world. And, you know, you start to figure out who he really is, but it's still the women who get dumped on more than anybody else. I can remember more of the women than I remember the men, even just generally speaking.
Well, he got to be the Bachelor after this. So this did not ruin him in the eyes of the franchise.
Can you believe that? Oh.
They have kept working with Kaitlyn Bristowe too. She's done some hosting for them. It's not like she became persona non grata. But they did put her in a position to get a lot of hate from the fans, and they didn't do that with Bob Guinea, right? They protected his reputation, even though Mike Fleiss, years later, revealed that, yes, he had slept with more than the women, more than the show told you. Right, he had slept with,
and
more
that's
women.
only the ones they told us, right? Like I'm sure there were others. I don't trust a man.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't trust Bob Guinea. Not at all. I don't know what he's doing with himself right now, but I have no trust in that man. The next scandal we will discuss is even darker. In 2017, during season 4 of Bachelor in Paradise, Corinne Olympios was in the pool and intoxicated when a sexual encounter began with Demario Jackson. Corinne later released a statement saying, "I am a victim. Something bad took place. I have little memory of that." Corinne also said she was pursuing therapy to recover from the aftermath of the incident, but that she wasn't even sure exactly what had occurred. Demario also responded to the incident. He said, quote, "It's unfortunate that my character and family name has been assassinated this past week with false claims and malicious allegations." For their part, there was an official investigation of the incident by Warner Brothers. It airs on ABC, but it's a Warner Brothers property. And the investigation concluded there was no evidence of misconduct. The incident ultimately led to Bachelor in Paradise, or BIP as it's commonly referred to, creating a 1 drink per hour limit to prevent people from becoming too inebriated to consent. So they sort of changed things. Unfortunately, this isn't the only time when it's been suggested the Bachelor franchise created an unsafe environment. Because I think a lot of people would allege, and they create this sloppy, unsafe environment because it produces drama. And usually it's fun drama, but on occasion it ends up being dangerous drama, because if you get everybody drunk, well, sometimes dangerous things are going to happen, especially if you don't always make sure that all of the people are safe. So, a year after this incident on Bachelor in Paradise, Bachelorette contestant Lincoln Adeem was revealed to have been convicted of indecent assault and battery of a woman. His conviction happened only days before Becca Kufrin's season of The Bachelorette premiered. And yet, the background checks either weren't comprehensive enough, or producers thought it might be interesting to have a person with a history of violence against women compete for a woman's hand in marriage. Like, what is that about?
I kind of have no words. I don't think they give a shit, genuinely, like, simply put, right, Sarah? Like, I do think, you listen, this has been a running conversation for 2 decades now, but I do believe ABC does the background checks. I do believe that they know when this stuff pops up. I know it. It's happened too many times now. Of course they do. But I think they bank on, like we said earlier, the drama happening, bringing in viewers, getting a viral moment, and it does work for them, right? Because it ends up creating so much buzz. People tune in. I don't know that The Bachelor will ever recover with the numbers that it used to have way in the beginning. So that way, I think it's kind of a failed effort. But yeah, they fucking know. They know.
They know. They absolutely know. Allegedly.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put that in to protect us.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, and while we don't know for certain of any violent or threatening behavior Colton Underwood engaged in while he was the lead of The Bachelor in 2019, some stuff went down afterwards. His winner, Cassie Randolph, filed for a restraining order against him in 2020 after alleging he placed a tracking device on her car and sent harassing messages. He also showed up at her parents' home uninvited. Cassie eventually dropped the restraining order. For his part, Colton Underwood came out as gay in 2021 during an interview with Good Morning America. In the interview, he said, "I ran for myself for a long time. I hated myself for a long time." Still not an excuse to stalk a woman.
No, I have so many issues with that. It's a complicated story, but I don't like you, Colton. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, and so much of violence against women, we know, is not about love. It's wanting to possess and control a woman. And that doesn't
Correct.
really have much to do with your sexuality, right? You can be a gay man and still think patriarchy needs for me to have a woman I'm in control of. So it didn't excuse his misogyny or his abuse. Really, it was such a weird thing. It's like one of these things is not related to the other, right? They're not related.
I agree. And I'm going to say something super controversial. There was a part of me, listen, first of all, I'm very happy and proud of him for coming out and being able to do that in such a public way as such a public person. However, I remember thinking the timing is a little unusual because it seemed designed to be a little bit of a buffer between him and the drama that was happening around him. He was getting painted pretty poorly and I think pretty fairly. And when he came out, it kind of worked in his favor in the sense that I think everyone sort of forgot the scandal and what was happening to Cassie, which I think is just awful. I don't know. The whole thing rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't like his timing. Let me put it that way. Ugh, I don't know. It's tricky.
He profited off of it. He got a new reality show called Coming Out Colton. And I even knew people who identified with as feminists, people who would actually like tear other people apart online, kind of cyberbully type feminists who were watching it and praising him. And this is one of, I did jump into the DMs there to be like, do you know what he did to Cassie Randolph? Like, do you know?
I love that, Sarah. I love that you did. Well, and he's still doing fine, right? Because he was just on the latest season of The Traitors and nobody was hating it. He's got a whole new fan base. Ugh.
I know. He's really profiting off of this. And I mean, I don't know if Cassie Randolph feels traumatized. I think a lot of people would after that level of abuse. And also being abused by someone that all of America wants you to stay with has got to add an extra layer of complication.
Well, you know what, though? You hit a good point just generally, don't you? Like, that's one of the wildest parts of all of this that I cannot imagine if I was having to go through this process where the world turns against you because you didn't choose the person they believe is better for you. And then on the other hand, like, rejecting someone who they think was the best option. And again, I do feel like the women get more villainized for this than the men ever do. And yeah, I think this is such a good example of that. This man is still a public figure that people love. I don't get it. I didn't forget Colton.
I know. Well, what you said is very interesting because I feel like Rachel Lindsay was really skewered for choosing Brian instead of Peter. And listen, she and Brian are now divorced. And I know you wanted her to be with Peter. I also feel like he was not the right choice. I think he didn't want what she wanted. He didn't want to get married. And a lot of people were judging her because they're saying, oh, you're just making this decision because you want to get married and because Brian is ready to commit to you. That is a totally legitimate reason to pick one guy over another.
Yeah.
That is a completely legitimate reason. If you want things out of life that they are not even ready to experiment with, then no. And also, why are you on The Bachelorette if you feel you're not ready to get married?
That was the question. Peter was, listen, I think about that man sometimes, but yes, he wasn't suited to the journey. Let's put it that way.
I mean, he was too good looking for this world.
Oh, yeah. And too sensitive, dare I say. But it's funny because, I mean, all this time later when, Rachel broke up with her guy, people were still like messaging her and going hard and being like, go get Peter. Like, guys, the man's moved on. She's moved on. It's been years, but I kind of love it.
And did they have anything in common or were they both just really attractive people? Like, that's the thing. They never would have dated in real life. Those people had nothing in common. He was like a personal trainer. She was a lawyer. What would they have spoken about?
Well, that's a whole larger thing too, right? Because as you mentioned earlier, you're in such isolated conditions that everything feels 10 times more serious and dramatic and beautiful, perhaps, than it really is. Like, I remember when they were in that room together. Again, I mentioned it so many times, but when she leaves her lashes on the floor, when Peter, of course, rescues them. And I just remember that conversation still and how serious and intense it was. And the reality is that they'd only known each other for like a few weeks at that point, maybe. What was it, like maybe a month or something, Sarah? But
not a long time.
It was it wasn't that serious in reality. And she probably woke up to that when she left the show. And same with Peter. But we all get so caught up in it that it feels like life or death. It's wild.
And I do imagine it feels serious because all you're doing for that 6-week period is talking about your love life, right? All you're doing is thinking about love. The producer's bringing up every time you see them, you're thinking about that person. So it does create the illusion of seriousness. I mean, we know that the brain can kind of fool itself into thinking things have happened that haven't yet. So if you just keep thinking about someone, you might think, oh yeah, we've been together for a long time. We're serious. And you're not.
Yeah.
You're not at all.
Yeah.
But I don't think for a long time, there was this misconception that people who went on the show were all stupid and that's why you could trick them. No, this would happen to anyone who was deprived of talking to friends and family, couldn't even watch the news. You don't know what's happening with the world, right? Like Rachel Lindsay has a great story about how when she was on Nick Viall's season of The Bachelor, during their fantasy sweep date, that was the day they found out that Trump had won the election. And she was a big Hillary Clinton supporter. So she's like, I got so wasted. I got so drunk. Which is why the next day, when they show you what she looked like the next day after the fantasy suite, she looks like her eyes are like bugging out and she like looks kind of crazy. It's because she was hungover. Beautiful, beautiful woman. But she was like, yeah, I was distraught, right? Fair enough. And then apparently like Nick had found out as well. And then all he did when he hugged her, when he greeted her at first, was he just said, I'm so sorry, because he knew that this would mean a lot to her. So they just had a terrible date, like just a terrible date. They didn't have sex. Apparently, he knew he was choosing Vanessa at this point, so he didn't want to lead Rachel on because he respected her. So they were never going to have sex anyway. But I think at this point, even if Rachel had been super into him, she wouldn't have had sex with him.
God, you know what I like to think about sometimes, Sarah? And again, you guys know we love Paradise, so this is where my head lives sometimes anyway. But like, if they had just made these other choices, that there's a version of like Nick in another timeline who did choose Rachel and they're off together. And then there's another timeline where Rachel did choose Peter and they're off together. And I just want to know how it's going so bad. Like maybe there's a timeline where Nick does not stay like the dirty dog that he is because he did choose Rachel, but we know who he is deep down inside. Sorry. God, we should do a whole episode just on Nick because I have thoughts there, and also with his current very problematic partner as well. Oh gosh, I wanted to say, touching on what you just said, Sarah, about the isolation of it all, lest we forget The Real World, which was one of, if not the first reality show that they pitched as a human experiment, right? Because you're keeping all these people in a house. They were, of course, allowed to go in and out of the house in a way that they couldn't in Bachelorville or can't. But it was still really effective in showing us how nuts you can get when you're just with a specific group of people for the certain amount of time. And so if you multiply that, you've got Bachelor and Bachelorette, where it's so much crazier. And so I do think these are all human experiments. Like that is one. Two, we're watching people in the hamster wheel, right? Like it's kind of bizarre when you really break it down. No, like reality TV is kind of a wild concept when you really think about it. We've just forgotten because it's been so many years now, I feel like.
Yeah, it's become normalized, but it is a very weird concept.
Yeah,
it is a form of torture to just put people in isolation and then make them compete for something, even if it is somebody's heart. It's very weird.
Isn't that wild? Like, oh.
Yeah, it's very weird. It's funny because Andrea Salenzi, who used to host the podcast YOY, the dating podcast, and a podcast I loved, no longer exists. She's now happily married with 2 children. So good for her. So the dating, everything she learned about dating, she applied and it worked out. Great podcast. She at one point went to interview the girls who were auditioning for The Bachelor to be like, what possesses someone to do this? And at that point, she's just like, I think they genuinely think that they have as good a chance of meeting a guy here as anywhere else because dating's become so bleak.
Yeah. Which is, again, wild because this show has spanned so many years and I think we're still in the same place. But,
But absolutely. I think, like, yes, some people are there because they want to be influencers for sure. And I do think they all want to be influencers pretty much because, of course they do. But also, I think on some level, they do believe in love. I think they believe that they could find love this way, that this could be their love story. And you know, why not? Sean and Catherine met that way. They seem happy. I was so into Sean and Catherine. Do you remember Sean and Catherine? So Sadaf, why do you think that despite all of these issues, we still get problematic people and this habit of casting inappropriate people persists? I mean, the reason they had to cancel the most recent season of Bachelorette was Taylor Frankie Paul threw bar stools, one of which hit her daughter, but they knew this. It's just the release of the video to TMZ made it so that they felt like they couldn't continue with the show. But they already knew that she had this history of violence. So whether it's just something a little bit more benign, but still problematic, like casting a guy like Peter who is on a dating show about getting married who doesn't want to get married, or casting straight up violent people, why do you think they continue when they interview people and background check them to hire inappropriate people for this series? Well, I shouldn't say hire. They're not always getting paid, but they choose inappropriate people.
I mean, I do think it goes back to what we were saying. Like they bank on not only ratings, but now virality matters so much, which is interesting, right? Because in the beginning of Bachelor Nation, we didn't have social media. So it's changed in that way quite a bit. You would think that it would work in the Bachelor world's favor, but it hasn't really. ABC gets shot on quite a bit. They don't seem to care at all. This new Taylor Frankie Paul drama, though, is fascinating to me. First of all, we watch, right? You also watch it, right? Too, Sarah, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. If you don't, you should get into it, guys. It's delicious. And now it's really going to be quite strange, I think, with this new development. But this was so interesting because, as we know, as people who've watched it from the start, we knew that this was something that had happened, that Taylor had done this, because that's how the show started. They tell us about it. However, we didn't have the video, right? We didn't have the footage. And I've been having to reckon with this myself, where I'm like, how is it that just seeing the video is what changed my viewpoints? You know, like, I was excited for her to be the Bachelorette, and I was going to go back to the Bachelorette after a long time of not caring for that world, because I wanted to see her in it. And I think a lot of people were, I know quite a few friends who were coming back to it. Again, we knew about these charges, we knew about the abuse, but for some reason, seeing it made it more real. So I think it tells us a lot of things. How we are conditioned when we're watching reality TV to treat it like it's characters and it's a story that's not really real, but it absolutely is. But then on the other hand, they were kind of smart when it comes to their bottom line, right? Because Mormon Wives is huge right now. It's massive. And Taylor is a big, big name. And so they knew they'd get the numbers. It makes sense. Like, just in the rollout with like announcing her, putting out the ads, putting out the photo shoot. Like, I was sitting there with bated breath. I don't know about you, Sarah, but I was
we
so
talked about
pumped.
this. Yeah, it was exciting. Even though I do agree, I think if I were casting it, I mean, this person has a history of violence. It doesn't seem like a good idea. It was risky, but there is a world in which it produced great TV, and we'll never see the TV it produced. But, you know, it's possible that it would have been a fascinating season.
That's the most fucked up thing. And I've talked about this with friends too. Like, a lot of us still hope that the season leaks. So what does that say about us? Maybe not good things. And I will reckon with that myself in therapy. But there is a joy and a fascination to watching people who are not so perfect, right? Like, it means that we're going to get maybe a more nuanced season. Taylor is such a fascinating choice too, because although she's the face of Mormon Wives, she's not particularly charming, and she's not like the most likable person. So I think she was already kind of a surprising choice in some ways. Sarah, what do you think it would have been like if we did get her season? Like, do you think it would have been promising? Because I want to say, let me add one thing, Sarah, before you answer, because the rumor is, and I actually believe it, that her partner, on and off partner, Dakota, she is abusing in the video, is the person who leaked the video. I mean, he was the one shooting the video. And there were a lot of rumors going around even before the video was leaked that he was not happy about her being on the show. And so a lot of people believe this was his way of kind of tampering her efforts. It's quite toxic, like to an insane level. But please go on, Sarah. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I have no idea what the show would have been like. I mean, she's somebody who is very good at creating a mountain out of a molehill, which is what needs to happen on these shows, right? You need to create drama even if there's none there. And she would do that, right? You can produce this woman very easily. Like, I feel like somebody could make a completely offhanded remark that's not even insulting, and the producers could convince her that they had said something really damning about her, and then she would just freak out for like 3 episodes. I really do believe that you could do that. So that's, I think, one of the reasons they hired her, because she has a bit of an explosive temper and you can produce her, right? I think that you can really incept ideas into this woman's head, which is why Mormon Wives worked so well. I wasn't even really sure what happened with the Dakota cheating rumors on Mormon Wives. I couldn't even really follow that drama. I didn't really understand it.
I know.
It's like that show, Tell Me Lies, that I tried to watch and I literally couldn't understand what was happening. Like, I could not follow the plot. She's like
not
that.
my cup of tea.
But you can tell there's drama. Even if you don't truly understand what she's upset about, there's chaos, there's drama. And I think increasingly that's what we're tuning in to watch. We don't need to know why there's drama. There just needs to be drama. Previously, reality TV explained the drama better. We understood the backstory. And I feel like now we don't even really need that. Just these people don't like each other for no reason.
And you know what cracks me up too is that she is a Mormon woman. And if you watch Mormon Wives, you know, like, they don't drink alcohol. well. I mean, they do engage in ketamine quite a bit, ketamine therapy, quote unquote, and other things, which is bizarre, but and confounding. But like, so we wouldn't have had that on the show, which I thought was also interesting. But you're so right, because Taylor is quite a dramatic individual, and she has really incredible and fascinating breakdowns that are at an incredible volume and remind me of a child in a way that chills me to my core. Like, and I get so riveted. So yeah, I think you're right. I think they were banking on that behavior and that chaos, but now they've gotten it to an extent they didn't expect. Here's the question. Do we feel like this could spell the end of things, Sarah, this moment? Because it definitely feels bigger than any other that we've had in a long time.
Well, they have plans to continue. So I don't know. I do think that this show, this franchise won't exist 10 years from now, but I don't think they're going to give up on it in the next year or two. I think they will try to make it work. They have already said they have plans. There's going to be another season of The Bachelor as well, debuting in the coming months. So I don't think they're ready to pull the plug, because I mean, if there's anything TV does well, it's doing something until you just can't stand watching it anymore. So I think that's what they'll do. And who knows, it might have a renaissance. I mean, I had completely stopped watching The Bachelor, and then Juan Pablo's season was such a train wreck that I watched that because people were talking about it and I wanted to be part of the conversation. So all that needs to happen is for it to become, as Mike Fleiss would say, something people want to talk about again.
Yeah.
That's all.
I mean, I suppose you're right. I thought that was going to be this season, but again, in some ways, you could argue that this really continues to do what ABC wants anyway, right? Like, it's created a massively viral moment. It's not in their favor at this precise moment, but I feel like once the new Bachelor season starts, they might still be able to carry over the drama and maybe get more viewers than we're thinking. Like, it might not be the dip that I think a lot of people are expecting, because you're right. Yeah, it's a conversation piece. I want to touch on one more thing, sir, that you brought up earlier, but the alcohol element, which I think is really interesting. God, that Corinne incident was so awful, so awful. And she was also pinned as a bit of a villain, right? In the Bachelor season she was on. And so I feel like that was at play here too, where people were kind of like, well, who cares? Like, she sucks. And I hated that because I actually really enjoyed her.
Oh my God. Abraham Lincoln took naps. Best line ever on The Bachelor.
Thank you, Sarah. Oh, she was an icon. I thought she was so wronged, and I hated the way that ABC dealt with this. And I think it should have been a way bigger scandal. It was so dark. I thought the whole thing should have taken a break. I'm surprised Bachelor in Paradise continues. But what I wanted to say was, even in Bravo, there's a running joke. It's not really a joke. It's quite dark. But that all of the housewives, for instance, are alcoholics. And quite a few of them are. Like, we've seen them go to rehab. We've seen them in very alcohol-infused dramatic scenarios that end in disaster. And the belief is, for a lot of fans and probably producers, that we have to ply them with alcohol to get those moments. And I mentioned Summer House, which is kind of a real world concept, but in this case they go to this one house every weekend in the summer, and that one too, it's a lot of alcohol, to the point where there's so many shots where you just see cases and cases of alcohol in like corners of the house, so they have them ready to go for parties and dinners. And the idea is, if we take alcohol out of the equation, do we still even have a show? And I think that is dark and something to reckon with.
Well, on the TV series Unreal, which was a fictionalized version of a show like The Bachelor, they did show the producers basically plying people with alcohol. At one point, they had a contestant who was Muslim and didn't drink because of her religion, and they just like spend so much time pressuring her to drink because they know that they can't manipulate people who are sober. And also, maybe if one girl decides to be sober, the other people will realize, oh, she's behaving in a more dignified way. Maybe I shouldn't drink either. And they also browbeat a woman who has bipolar disorder and can't drink for that reason because of her medication into drinking. And then she dies by suicide on that show. So we know that alcohol is kind of the unofficial star of the show, right? Unreal showed that in a really pointed way. And I have no idea if the producers are quite this pointed by basically being like, you've got to drink or you're no good to me. I don't know if they explicitly say that. But if you put people in a house with lots of alcohol and everyone's bored, they can't call their parents, they can't call their friends, they can't watch the news. I don't know. You're probably going to get a lot of day drinking, and then some people are doing it and it feels like the thing to do, so everyone starts doing it. I don't know. I feel like it's a recipe for your drinking problem getting out of control. If you have a drinking problem, and even if you don't have a drinking problem, I feel like I would just be binge drinking for something to do.
Same, Sarah. Like, what else is there? And by the way, I'm so glad you brought up Unreal. I do want to say that it was created by a former Bachelor producer. So the belief is that a lot of what she put into the show is coming from real life. So if you are a fan of this world like us and you haven't watched it, please go do yourself a favor. It's very juicy. May I add one slightly goofy fact too, that in the Real Housewives world, there's another joke that we never ever want our women to get pregnant, because when they're pregnant, they can't drink. And when they can't drink, it's not fun. Now that's also very dark, but I'll leave you with that.
Oh, okay. All right. That explains why they cast mostly women who seem like they're done having children.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also the concept is elder women, right? So that's the case generally, but in the more recent years, they brought on younger wives. And I think that's partly to enhance the drama effect and the clash between ages. But we've had a surprising number of pregnancies lately. And I will say they're boring. It's boring. I don't want to see you pregnant. Sorry.
If you want to see that, you can watch Mormon Wives. They're always pregnant.
Yeah. Oh my God, constantly.
Yeah, you can just watch that. So here's an interesting thing I want to talk about. And this is the last thing I want to talk about. The debate about whether watching this show is just inherently anti-feminist. So Bachelor Nation is famous for casting a group of aspiring influencers named Madison, a disproportionate number of whom are white, to compete for the prize of a ring. Even on the gender-flipped version, The Bachelorette, she does not propose. The winner proposes after she tells him that he's won and can propose to her.
So stupid.
She still doesn't propose. And I think Sarah Silverman put it best on a 2012 episode of Amanda de Cadenet's The Conversation. She says, "I'll tell you what's offensive about these shows, that they are on ABC during prime time." She went on to say, 25 women in JCPenney prom dresses, fully grown, going, "He took us to a castle." No, he didn't. The producers took you to a castle. She also said, "I think, wow, some young girl is watching this, and there should be a warning saying this is not acceptable behavior." So add to this list of grievances the fact that only a handful of the leads on the show have ever been people of color. We haven't seen many people who live with disabilities. Like, there's no diversity. It doesn't look like real life. Everybody's skinny, right? And that has been the case for 49 seasons of the show. We have a large sample size now.
Ooh. May I add, because The Bachelor, Bachelorette, there's international versions too, right? And there have been queer ones in other countries that did well. And yet America refuses to go there, which I think is interesting too.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when they kind of have queer characters like Demi on Paradise,
yeah,
we thought that maybe that would be a harbinger of a completely queer season. And that didn't happen, right? So the pace of modernizing is just so slow on this franchise. It's ridiculously retrograde.
It's really weird.
Yeah. And also, I mean, the show's been critiqued for racist depictions of contestants of color. And I think that Unreal, which, as you said, was created by a former Bachelor producer who fictionalized things, but was probably inspired. They have a really good illustration of how this happens, right? There is an episode where a Black producer goes up to a Black contestant and is basically like, the only way you're going to get screen time is if you do Omarosa, like act like Omarosa, the famous contestant from The Apprentice. And this woman doesn't want to do that. That's not really her personality, but he just tells her, you have to. And if you look at the depictions of racialized women, they're often portrayed as cartoonish on the show. I mean, poor Jubilee. I don't know if anyone remembers Jubilee.
Yeah.
She's a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
She was so accomplished.
I loved her.
And they just showed the weirdest clips that were definitely not reflective of who she was as a person.
Well, do you remember, like, a lot of fans, myself included, really wanted her to become the Bachelorette in the following season? There was a really, really big outcry because she was so charming and lovely. And of course, the producers didn't give a shit. That would have been great. God, I loved her.
Oh, she would have made great TV. Well, they didn't have the first Black lead until 2017 when Rachel Lindsay became the Bachelorette. And you know what? I love Rachel Lindsay. I think she's too good, dignified to make good TV, actually. I like her as a human being and I admire
Agreed.
her. But I actually feel like Jubilee, who they could have cast earlier, would have been a really good first Bachelorette. But you know what? I don't want to critique Rachel Lindsay too hard for being boring because most of the white leads are boring too. So that's just sort of par for the course. On this show, the leads are usually really boring.
They're quite
Sometimes
boring.
they're like nuts. Sometimes they're a bit nuts, and that can be fun, but also scary. I feel like the only lead where I truly was like, you were the perfect mix of like spicy, but also a good human being was Kaitlyn Bristowe.
Oh, yeah. She was really like such a good find. Who do you think was like the ideal one in the Bachelor world? Because I think that's trickier to figure out. They're all so boring.
I really like Sean at the time. And I think that in Bachelor Nation, there's a really sweet chapter when Sean and Catherine talk about actually, I almost cried when I read this because I think that they genuinely fell in love without expecting to. I think they probably went on the show trying to be famous. And then after their final date, this is a really sweet story. He went to her room and found her. And he was like, do you actually like me? Because I actually really love you.
Yeah.
And then they had this private conversation where he's like, is this for real? Like, I'm going to for real propose to you. And they got married and now they have 3 beautiful children. And do I share Sean's political or religious beliefs? No. But it was actually really lovely to see 2 people who I don't think would have met any other way fall in love. And it did feel kind of like destiny. It was really, really sweet.
Oh, Sarah, I forgot about that. That actually delivers on the whole Bachelor promise too, doesn't it? It's got the romance, and you're right. It's like you would not be together if it were not for this show. You probably would not find each other in any way. But that's such a rare example. But yeah, I do love that. Oh,
I know.
That's a nice
I know.
memory.
And so sometimes I'm like, is it all worth it because they found each other? I'm like, well, a lot of other people suffered, so not really.
Yeah. True.
It is very sweet. Like this vegan girl from Seattle ends up with this like Christian boy from Texas. Like, I don't know. Like, how else would they have met? But they ended up being perfect for each other.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I
That's
know.
so true.
I know. It was actually really sweet. So anyway, going back to the question of whether we can ever see this as feminist, there are actually a lot of feminists who are incredibly interested in the show. That's something that surprises a lot of people. It's feminist following. If you look at Claire Fallon and Emma Gray's podcast, Love to See It, it started with The Bachelor. They wanted to use it as an opportunity to talk about modern dating norms and compulsory heterosexuality. And so they discussed the show through a feminist lens, but they are still following the show. They're also following Bachelor in Paradise. That's the same thing with Allison Williams, who is a very vocal feminist, but has also written about how she believes that watching the show helps her understand reality and the world better. She wrote a chapter about that in Bachelor Nation. And she even met her first husband at the Bachelor viewing party.
Wild.
They're no longer together. But this show is a huge feminist following. And I, as a feminist, watched this show for years. So do you think this is something that we all did because we liked reality TV drama, but couldn't admit that it was wrong? We couldn't admit how anti-feminist this was, so we had to pretend that there was some feminist value in watching the show so we could critique modern dating norms. I don't know. Like, were we all just manipulating ourselves into believing a lie?
Oh, gosh. I gotta think about it. Well, I mean, I've thought about it many times over the years. Yeah, you're right. I mean, listen, even feminists like to be entertained with nonsense here and there. But also, if I examine myself, I think in the beginning, I just thought this is a really fascinating concept. I like the human experiment part of it. I think it could be potentially romantic. But the more I watched, and very quickly, I was like, oh, this is actually really sinister and old fashioned. And I hope by now, if you're all listening up until this point, you see how much it operates by purity principles and is actually so dated in that sense. And it's kind of wilder when you think that it took this long to bring a Mormon woman on. Like, they probably should have done that way sooner. But I also think we're right, and we're in a cyclical moment right now because Mormon Wives is as big as it is, so are Trad Wives. We're in the Nara Smith era. Like, things are moving in a different direction, and feminism is a bigger conversation now than ever. We're seeing contestants who are not feminists, and we're seeing a production team that does not give a shit about its women. And that's been hard for me. And I think that's why I've been so in and out of the series. Like, I can't reckon with it. And so I've stopped watching. But then that part of me that just loves reality TV will sneak in, and I'm like, oh, I want to watch Taylor's season, even though I know it'll probably be a shit show, and it's turned out so much worse. And I always really just struggled with how white the show is. Like, that's been a big, big problem for me. I find it hard to relate when I see the sea of white men or white women who are the candidates each season. Every time they released the cast photos, it's so scary, guys, if you've ever taken a look at it. And it's like 10 guys named John, 5 guys named Jason, and like a bunch of Jessicas. Like, it's so funny to me. So yeah, it's gotten harder and harder for me to swallow it. We talked about this too when we did the Real Housewives episode, but can we say that these shows are feminist? Well, listen, The Real Housewives is obviously very different from Bachelor. With The Real Housewives, our feeling was, yeah, it's still a feminist show because these women get to be whatever they want to be, which is ultimately what this is about, right? And they can be messy, they can be great businesswomen and great moms, but they can also be mean and bullies and all these other things. But I think when it comes to this world, you don't get to be whatever you want. You have to follow a very specific path, right? What makes the perfect Bachelor and Bachelorette? Not a queer person, not a person of color, a white person who looks a certain way and can wear a certain kind of dress and suit and follows the rules and doesn't have sex outside the fantasy suite. So, once I added all of that up, yeah, I don't think it's feminist. And I have a very hard time being entertained by it at this point. That was a long way to say that.
No, I completely agree. I think that this is something where I enjoyed watching it. And rather than just saying this is my guilty pleasure, I had just convinced myself I was learning something about the world and learning about compulsory heterosexuality. And I was, but I don't think I needed to watch as many seasons as I did to get the lesson, right? I don't think I needed to case study this entire series. I really didn't. And it made me, I think, question my values in a way, probably subconsciously, but I was rooting for some of these messed up relationships that I shouldn't have been rooting for.
We all want to, well, not all, but a lot of us do want to follow that romantic fairy tale. Oh my gosh, I've wanted that. I've enjoyed watching that since I was a kid. Like, of course I'm going to give this a go. This is our modern fairy tale, the way it's set up anyway, right? Or Disney story. But I will say, I think I was always more in it for the drama and like the shit shows that would unfold. But even those started to get much more sinister because, as you mentioned, like, there was a lot of the weird kind of sexual assault allegations, the kind that there were quite a few violent moments, and usually involving Black cast members who I felt like were incited to engage in violence too, which is a really dark issue. So yeah, even those got really dark. Oh God, now that we're talking about it, I'm like, I can't believe I was going to go back for Taylor. Ooh.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot has changed in Bachelor Nation since it debuted. Creator Mike Fleiss actually left in March of 2023, so it no longer has its creator. And he himself has found himself the subject of serious domestic violence allegations. They were leveled against him in 2019 when his wife and former Miss America, Laura Kepler, alleged he physically attacked her, pinning her against a wall. She also alleged he demanded she get an abortion. So it's important to note that these allegations were later dropped and the couple reached a financial settlement. They also reconciled and they're still together. But he has his own problematic history. So it's not surprising to me that a show he created wouldn't shy away from casting people who might be violent because clearly it's not that big a deal to him.
Maybe it's also problematic that we have men running these kinds of shows, right? And spearheading television shows where it's women who are really put on the line more than anybody else. Like, that's also so tough to grasp.
It is tough to grasp. And because you're right, there are so many safety issues for the women that are not really there for the men to the same extent. I mean, Colton did escape. He did jump the fence. But that just shows you to an extent his male privilege. Like, he was strong enough to do that. He could free himself when he wanted to be freed. right? If you think about Kaitlyn Bristowe, she couldn't have freed herself that way. She's too tiny.
That's so funny. Oh, I love that. That's where we come back to. Thank you for that, Sarah. Yeah, you're right. You're right. She
Jumping the fence. If Colton had just applied himself to athletics instead of being an abusive boyfriend, he could have gone to the Olympics. Really. He could have been a pole vaulter or something.
Yeah. And now he's just doing the reality TV circuit for the rest of his life.
I know. Anyway, it is what it is. It is what it is. If you are a good-looking white man, you can somehow just get everyone back on your side after doing appalling things.
I mean, for the love of God, Nick Viall has a podcast, a very popular podcast. It's infuriating.
Yes. And that brings us to the end of this week's episode. So we're going to do our final segment. Hindsight is 2026, where we choose the one moment that we would have handled differently if we were the subject of today's story. So I guess the subject of today's story, I don't know. You can pick any aspect of Bachelor Nation, the producers, the leads. What's the one moment that you would have changed and maybe would have changed the whole world, like in Paradise, and then go back and Dylan's alive.
It all goes back to Paradise. Gosh. Oh, Sarah, there's too much. How do I choose one thing? And how do I keep it specific? Because my thing has always been, I feel that if they had chosen to be more diverse much, much sooner and had perhaps some consultants on the production team who could help them figure out how to handle these relationships and how to talk to those contestants to incite some interesting moments and maybe a bit of conflict, but keep it safe and not turn it into bigotry. I think it's possible. I think it's very possible. I think Bravo does that quite well. ABC struggles quite often with that, even with their other reality programs. But I think they need a different production team, and I wish they'd gotten more diverse sooner. And again, give some of the international shows a shot, guys, if you're listening. There's ones that are really wonderfully gay, and we had one season, I can't remember where, I believe it was somewhere in Europe, but where two of the women who were both candidates on a Bachelor season fell in love with each other, and they're still together today. It's a really sweet relationship and story. Maybe we'll link to it in the show notes. I know that's a really big one, Sarah, but it's hard for me to say anything else because that's what's bothered me more than anything else. Get some fucking consultants. Police yourselves.
And that is interesting because a lot of the women who appear on this show come out afterwards. And I think it's interesting where they're like, I've been turned off the men forever, right? This convinced me that I am queer. And I get it. I get it.
Well, I mean, God, best example, right, is Becca, who is with Kaylee Kiyoko now. And they have the sweetest relationship. And who would have thought? Who would have thought?
I mean, Gabby Windey is married to Rob Hoffman, too. Another great example.
Favorite couple.
Yeah, such a great couple. So I just think that that's interesting because I guess if anything, if you're on the fence about whether or not you're queer, if you're wrestling with your sexuality, this is going to convince you, right? This really is this experience.
It says a lot, huh?
Yeah, exactly. No more men ever again.
Yeah. What would you change, Sarah?
What would I do differently? I mean, I think that one big thing they should have done differently is cast Jubilee as the Bachelorette, because I think that would have been an interesting turning point that would have shown, okay, we want dynamic, interesting people. We also want to cast diverse people. And what would have happened is that the more racist conservative fans would have stopped watching, and then the show just might have progressed more quickly. And then maybe you would have had a queer Bachelorette or a queer Bachelor sooner. Well, we still haven't had those things. So I think that would have been a big turning point for the show. They clearly talked about it. I can't imagine there wasn't a discussion of whether she should be the Bachelorette. And then they decided to go in a direction that would be more palatable for people who were conservative, right? Rachel Lindsay, I love Rachel Lindsay, and she's very outspoken about politics and she's very outspoken about racism. They didn't let her do that on the show.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem because you've got to let those contestants be who they are, which again is why I feel like you need diverse production members too. It can't just be the same team. It can't just be Mike Fleiss or a man running the show. I do want to say too, part of the problem and why I'm hitting on this is that for instance, we had an Asian bachelorette, and even when we had Rachel, even when we had Matt, I feel like the POC are kind of set up to fail a lot of the time, because when we've had candidates who have violence in their history or other criminal involvement, it tends to be on those seasons. And to me, that says quite a lot. Like, they don't protect their people of color ever. And I think that's really scary. And again, when they've had quite a lot of, this has happened quite a few times, I think now, when they have Black cast members, they will throw them under the bus before anyone else. And sometimes I even wonder, when there is a white lead and there is a Black cast member who makes it close to the end. I hate to say it. This is how jaded I am, but I'll think, like, did the producers just insist that person has to be there towards the end? That's how bad it is, right?
To an extent, I think that that's probably what's happening in some of the situations, not all. I do think that, like, Nick Viall, I think one of the reasons he didn't take her to the final two is because I think he actually did really admire and respect Rachel and didn't want her to think, like, that she might get a proposal. I think he did that to spare her feelings. Honestly, I really do. Because I think the person you like second best, if you're a good person, The Bachelor usually sends them home before the final two. If they are a good person. And then you get those messy situations where somebody is actually expecting a proposal because they were kept around to the final two and they are your second favorite, so the connection is real. That's, like, so unethical. Never, ever do that. That's what you should not do. And that's what the people who are kind of assholes do. But yeah, I mean, I think that definitely the show does not do right by racialized people. It doesn't do right really by any of the bachelorettes either. We saw that with Kaitlyn Bristowe. We saw what they did to Becca on Becca's season of The Bachelorette, where she'd already been humiliated by Ari. And then they didn't really vet the candidates at all. And she ended up getting engaged to a guy who was racist and sexist and did not share her political views, because he kind of tricked her into thinking he was a good person. And then she got off the show and saw his social media and was like, what on earth did I agree to marry? So they don't do right by these women. They knew that Becca had gone to the Women's March. Like, they knew that this was the case with her. So they set her up to have this heartbreaking situation where she thought she was in love with this guy who did not share her values at all.
Well said. I think a lot of the way the production works on these shows is we want to have a good show for the remainder of time that we have you, but we don't give a shit what happens after the proposal and once the cameras go down, which is also interesting because they set it up like it's this beautiful fairy tale forever and the rest of your lives, right? But not really.
No, not at all. And this brings us to just the end of our discussion about The Bachelor. We could talk about Bachelor Nation forever, but we're not going to. So if you liked us, you can listen to more of us on The Reheat for free on the Seeker app. You can also find the show on the Frequency Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts. You've got choice. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Instagram at Sahikian Sarah. And Sadaf, where can listeners find you?
Listeners can find me on Twitter at _Stefson and on Instagram at Canada Whore. And if you liked this podcast, please rate, review, subscribe so other listeners can find us too. And if you'd like us to keep growing, you know what I'm going to say. We want you to support us on Patreon. Come join us there at patreon.com/The Reheat, where we've got some goods in store for you. Thank you for listening.